Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes. Now, politicians of all parties really want to get rid of the pension triple lock because it is costing them a lot of money. However, they know that any party that gets rid of that will be finished because the grey vote, the silver vote if you want, is a very powerful voting bloc. And so they don't want to alienate that. And they also don't want to be seen as sort of being the ones that are taking money away from pensioners, especially as we have just about one of the worst pensions in the world. However, the IMF are about to gift, I think, the Conservatives one of the greatest gifts of all. The International Monetary Fund has done a report. I suppose you could call it a pre-action report because undoubtedly they're going to have to be called in very soon. And it seems that one of the conditions for them coming in to bail Britain out will be eradication of the triple lock. And if this happens on Labour's watch, the Tories will be overjoyed because it will have been Labour who got rid of the triple lock, albeit forced to, but they would have got rid of it, not the Tories. And when the Tories come back in, well, the triple lock will have gone, and they'll go, well, of course we will when the time is right, when we have the economic conditions, bring it back. However, basically, it will be written off for good. It will die a death. But that report, and it was only published yesterday afternoon, says also that taxes will have to go up. In fact, there's a lot of things in this report, all of which are pretty bad news, generally. Now, this report was written some 3 weeks ago, but it was delayed in publishing. Why? Why the delay? Well, accordingly, it was quite embarrassing, and the government want to get some ducks in a row before they do it. But the IMF have effectively poured cold water very scornfully all over Rachel Reeves, her budget, her plans, everything. The IMF have realised that she's useless as well. I suppose they're all sitting there ready to deploy, aren't they? Ready to come. But what they've said is worth listening to, and I'm going to read it out because it's too long to remember. But they say this: unless the authorities revisit their commitment not to increase taxes on working people, further spending prioritisation will be required to align better the scope of public services with available resources. That means they've got to abandon this "we're not raising taxes" line if they actually want to spend money not where they want to spend it, but where it needs to be spent. They continue: the authorities have already embarked on this process through recent reforms to incapacity and disability benefits, but other avenues for savings need to be considered. In other words, well done to you for cutting benefits to those who need them, but you're going to have to cut even more money from those who need money too. In particular, they say, the triple lock should be replaced with a policy of indexing the state pension to the cost of living, as recommended in previous Article 4 reports. Sayonara, triple lock. You will go up by the quote cost of living, although nobody has decided what the cost of living will be. Will it be, this form of inflation, that form of inflation? Will it encounter this? Does the cost of living include that? And so forth. And you can guarantee any government that does that will always look to be getting the cost of living down to its lowest common denominator. They want the tiniest rise possible. You can guarantee food won't be included in that, even though food inflation is high. They continue: access to public services could also depend more on an individual's capacity to pay. In other words, they're going to means test public services. You might be earning, working and paying into a system for which you get nothing out. In which case, why would you do that? Charges should be levied on higher income users, which they are, such as co-payments for health services. In other words, basically the end of the NHS free at contact because, hey, look at you, you're earning money, you've got to pay for your medical care. While still shielding the vulnerable, they say. There may also be scope to expand means testing of benefits. So basically, ending the NHS, getting rid of the triple lock, etc. Now, it's what they call, you can't say the S word here, the self-ending, word. They don't like it, but it is political chop suey, as apparently are any other kind of money-saving examples. I mean, whatever Reeves looks at to try and cut money is always going to be rejected by the left of her party, rejected by the people who get it. And when it comes to things like the triple lock and the NHS, rejected by everybody. But the IMF, when they are called in, which they will be, are going to insist upon it. And so there we go. We're going to have the NHS will be destroyed by the IMF because of Labour and Reeves. That's how bad she is. She's not just so bad that she's destroying the economy, but as the economy goes boom, and I don't mean boom up, I mean bust boom, I mean just explodes, the NHS will fail, the IMF will basically end it, and the only people who actually get any NHS are those who don't contribute to it. At that point, I suspect we need to actually abandon the NHS and go to a pure insurance-based national health system. We cannot afford the NHS, and the IMF will abandon it. And why should you pay in a lot of taxes for services that you will never ever use because you're actually barred from using them? It's chaotic, isn't it? But that isn't all the IMF are after, because other things are being mentioned. Obviously, they want to hike taxes. They're looking at raising income tax in particular. They want more bands. They want the higher bands introduced. They also want now at the bottom, they are talking about index linking by law, index linking the tax-free allowance to help the poorer. But raising tax rates across the board to what they're calling European averages, which would mean about 23% for your basic rate taxpayer, and all the way up to about 60% at the top. Watch as they flee, watch as they run, watch as they go. But it's there, as well as all, so raising the taxes as well as cutting all the benefits as we've discussed. On top of that, and this is the one where it will hurt Labour the most, they want to limit borrowing. Effectively, when the IMF come in, the IMF will be the ones controlling Britain's borrowing, and they will put it in place that borrowing has to reduce. Now, Rachel Reeves hasn't got a clue because all she knows is tax and borrow and spend. She has no idea about investment, and they won't have the money to invest. It's all going bit Pete Tong. And finally, on this, before we roll it off, is the biggest one of all. They have the autumn budget, they have the spring announcements, and they want that to stop. They want one single budget and statement a year. Said otherwise, you're spooking the markets, you're providing too much information that people can run into. They want to limit that information. Think about that. They want to limit the information released by government to its people. They want to control what you hear and when you hear it, because they don't want you to know what's going on. They want to keep you in the dark. They're saying it's better that we don't scare people by letting them know constantly what's going on. Dictatorship. Absolute. So having the public finances formally assessed only once a year in order to avoid what they call over-frequent budget anxiety. Unbelievable, isn't it? But worry not, dear viewer. Worry not, because these things are going to happen, whether you worry or not. So don't worry about it. It's going to happen. Labour will be humiliated. Reeves will be seen as the absolute terrible failure she is. And the Labour Party will probably not get into power again for another 25, 30 years, if ever. I actually think we need now to make them a prescribed organisation and ban anyone who ever votes Labour from ever being allowed to vote again. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks a lot. Bye.